This is Legacy Battle. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, whatever you're listening on. I'm Mike Williams, creator of Legacy Battle. My panelists tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King and Leroy Thompson. Penn State Collegiate All-Star Kevin Adams, Ball State athlete Paul Havicott. We're joined tonight by a special guest from who's a 1989 NFL first-round draft pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers, running back out of Georgia, where he was a first-team All-American. He was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. In 2007, he was inducted into the Georgia Bulldogs Hall of Fame. So we got running back Tim Worley. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Hey, man, appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on.
Awesome. As always, we're going to have a Q&A for Tim after our debate tonight. And tonight's debate is going to be the greatest Georgia Bulldogs running back of the last 40 years. And if you're familiar with Georgia's history, they are stacked in this category, absolutely stacked. Honorable mentions tonight. Listen to this, the guys that just missed our list: Rodney Hampton, Knowshon Marino, Sony Michel, three solid running backs, but they just missed our list tonight. So we're going to start out tonight with Kevin and Todd Gurley.
Yeah, Gurley was running back for 3 years for Georgia. First team all SEC honors. Selected 10th overall in the 2015 draft. But as a freshman, he was definitely an immediate impact to Georgia's backfield. They finished that season 12-2. I'd say he was a big reason why. He rushed for 100 yards on 8 carries and 2 TDs in his very first game as a true freshman. He also had a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown in that game. The next game, he ran for 111 yards on 10 carries. That's over 10 yards a carry. The following week, he went for 130 yards. He rushed for pretty much over 100 yards almost every single game that season in his freshman year. He is the second true freshman in Georgia history to rush for 1,000 yards. The only other true freshman prior to that was Herschel Walker, who did that in 1980. His 17 TDs in that season tied him for third in a single season for most touchdowns in school history. He finished second in the SEC in rushing yards, only trailing Johnny Manziel that year, which is pretty impressive, a quarterback. He was named to the All-SEC first team that year, like I had mentioned. He was one of 2 true freshman running backs to accomplish that in 2012. His sophomore season in 2013, he made the second team All-SEC. In 2014, he rushed for 208 yards against Tennessee, which was the highest single game total since 1992 for Georgia. Garrison Hurst was the one that had the next highest. I think it was like 248 yards. This season, he also ended up getting suspended, unfortunately, in his junior year for 4 games. And then when he came back, he tore his ACL. But he still finished that season with 911 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns in just 6 games. Unbelievable, almost 1,000 yards in just 6 games. He finished his Georgia career with 3,285 yards, which ranks him second, and 36 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for second in school history at the time of when he left Georgia. He averaged 6.4 yards rushing per game. He only had 3 fumbles over those 3 seasons, losing 2. And 247sports.com listed him number 3 all time for Georgia. No one we're talking about today was higher than him on that list.
So, Tim, with Todd, he had speed, he was an agility runner, and he had some nasty stiff arms. What are your thoughts on Todd Gurley's style?
Well, Todd Gurley, his style was my type. That was my style. That was the old wrecking ball Georgia tailback style. I mean, he was big, he was fast, he was powerful, and he loved the contact. And that's the style of running backs Georgia always had. I mean, when you look at Herschel Walker, Herschel punished people. And when I watched Todd Gurley run the ball, he really punished people. You really had to bring your lunch with you in order to tackle Todd Gurley. And, he deserves it. I think he was one of the best running backs he's in the top 3, definitely in the top 3 in Georgia history. And, it's unfortunately that, he had some hiccups in between, but he's that guy. He was that guy. And I think he was a great back.
And he's another guy that his NFL career stalled out right there around the age of 30, and it just happens so often. These guys take a pounding and the bodies break down. But let's move on to Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I'm gonna do Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's been terrorizing my Steelers at least twice a year, and I think this year he finished third behind Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. But that's NFL, and we'll concentrate on Georgia. And we might need you here, Mike, because I think Kevin's spitting some lies, so we'll have you judge this. But with Georgia, he played 4 years. I think the best college running back should play all 4 years. But with Georgia, he played 47 games, totaling 4,769 rushing yards, 44 TDs, averaged 60.3 yards per carry. Season average per game was just over 100 at 101.5. And throughout the course of his college career, he had 4 receiving touchdowns and just over 360 yards, 5 receptions for 59 yards versus Florida in 2014, and then 206 versus Louisiana. And he had a receiving TD of 49 yards. So I suppose if you add those receiving yards, which may seem insignificant, he gave Georgia a total of over 5,000 yards of total offense. Exciting player to watch. I perused his college highlight reel. He had a 266-yard rushing game against number 20 Louisville in 2014. Kevin, what's up? You said yours was the highest. Mike, please arbitrate. In 2005, he had 2 games in which he included rushes of 83 yards, the last versus number 13 Alabama in 2015. He had a 3 TD game against Southern in 2015. For his career, he had 23 100-yard rushing games, 3 200-yard rushing games. His total rushing yards trails only Herschel Walker in both UGA and Southeastern Conference lists of all-time career leaders. That number also ranks 39th among all rushers in the history of college football. He recorded his 24th career game with 100 yards or more, rushing with 145, including 2 touchdowns against Oklahoma, and ran for 150 yards versus Kentucky, reaching 1,000 yards on the season for the 3rd time in his career on his final carry of the day, which was a 55-yard TD dash, being the only other Bulldog to do that besides Herschel Walker. Twice earned SEC Offensive Player of the Year of the Week honors. And I heard Tim Worley say about yours, Kevin, he's top 3. So I'll translate that for you. He is not the number 1. Nick Chubb is probably the number 1, plus you had an error in your stats, it looks like.
So, Tim, Chubb is a runner that uses cutback lanes. He's considered a one-cut runner. What are your thoughts on him and the style that he can play? He's a very good receiver as well.
Nick Chubb was a complete ball player. Not only could he run the ball, he could block, he could catch. The thing I love about Nick Chubb, he was consistent. He was consistent every game. You knew for a fact that every game he went out there on the field and played, Chubb was going to get you 100 yards plus. And he was unbelievable, breaking tackles, great balance. And you got to look at Chubb. Look at the injury that looked like a career-ending injury against Tennessee back in the day, and he came back from that, where nobody thought he would be able to come back. I didn't even think he would come back, but it was a miracle. It happened, and it seemed like to me he got even stronger. And if you look at this kid right now, as he gets older and more mature in years in the NFL, it looks like he's getting better. You know what I mean? And he's just that guy, man, like Todd Gurley. And I got to say, Nick Chubb and Todd Gurley, in that era, they're my top 3, my top 5, So I'll give you guys my number 1 when we get to it.
All right, let's go to Garrison Hurst.
All right. I when I had the opportunity to represent or talk about Garrison Hurst, I was pretty excited because being my age and all, that's when the first running backs really got a chance to watch, NFL wise too, and to see what he did at Georgia was just really really impressive, and that's why I think he's the best Georgia running back since the great Herschel Walker. He played 3 great years, and in those years his accumulated yardage increased from 717 his first year, 717 yards his first year. His second year, he was just short of $1,000 with 968, and his third year in 1992 with an ungodly 1547, 1,547 yards. That's when I believe in '92 is when Garrison Hurst really got on the map. He was the SEC Player of the Year, and as everyone knows, the SEC is the varsity of the NCAA's. All the other players in the other leagues, it's like, junior varsity. So he was the Player of the Year. He was a consensus All-American. He won the Doak Walker, and for those that aren't familiar with that, the Doak Walker is the top nation's running back. He's voted into the Florida Georgia Hall of Fame, and then in '93, he was the Citrus Bowl MVP in '93. He went on to have a highly decorated NFL career too. Again, that's where I was more familiar with, where I know more about the NFL than I do the college stats. I know he went on to be a comeback player of the year in 2001 after missing 2 years with an injury and coming back stronger than ever when people thought he would be finished. And to me, that shows a lot of heart, and that shows what someone's made of it if they're able to come back from that. He had great years with the Cardinals, the 49ers. And for those that don't know me, I'm a Seahawks fan, so that that doesn't translate well for me. But he was very fun to watch growing up. And yeah, that's what I have on Garrison Hurst, who I believe is the best running back since Herschel Walker for the Dogs.
Tim, so with Hurst, fearless running style. However, this guy might be the biggest trash talker we're talking about tonight. He wasn't afraid to throw it out there. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is it just something they do to get fired up? And what are your thoughts on Garrison Hurst?
I think Garrison was amazing. Garrison, right away, Garrison's always been in my top 5. I think to display the kind of talent he did when Georgia really wasn't that good. When Garrison was a freshman and when he was a sophomore, I think they started to turn it around, like he said, in '92. I think Ray Goff was the coach then, but Garrison was consistent. He was that guy. He carried the load, and he proved himself every Saturday, man. And so he was just a tremendous runner. He knew how to run the ball. He knew how to set up his blocks. I mean, he could turn the corner and change gears on you in a minute. And he was just a complete football player. So Garrison also, he's in my top 5.
So we're going to move on to our final running back. That's going to be Lars Tate.
Oh. All right. Lars
My
Tate
man.
stood at 6'2", a little tall for a back. He weighed in at 215 pounds. After playing his senior season at a high school in Indianapolis, he was named Gatorade's National High School Offensive Player of the Year for 1983. Tate joined the Georgia Bulldog backfield in 1984. Immediately began to make an impact. He found the end zone 3 times in his freshman season and gained 425 yards from scrimmage. During his sophomore year, Tate was part of a crowded backfield, which saw 5 backs all get more than 90 touches, including some guy named Tim Worley. Tate stood out with a 6.0 average and 3 scores that year. 1986, Tate took it to the next level. He led all Bulldog rushers with 1,168 yards from scrimmage and scored 17 touchdowns. That was tops in the SEC. 1987 was another great season for Tate. He again reached over 1,100 yards from scrimmage, scored 14 times, which was second most in the SEC, and helped the Bulldogs to a number 13 AP ranking. It was the school's first top 25 ranking in the previous 4 seasons. In all, Tate rushed for 3,017 yards, which is still 6th most in school history. Only Herschel Walker and Nick Chubb had more carries than him. So, he could carry the load. Tate went on to be drafted by the Buccaneers in the NFL, but suffered a career-ending neck injury in just his 3rd season. So sadly, we will never know, how he could have achieved at the pro level. But in Athens, his running style, it was once described by his former teammate Kim Stevens as fast and smooth. Stevens also said that Tate was highly motivated and super talented. I would also add that he had some great balance. While in Tampa, he once scored a touchdown on a 40-plus yard run after like a crazy flip over the line of scrimmage. Check that video out. Maybe Michael could put that video on here. But tragically, Lars Tate, he fell to cancer a couple years back. He's no longer with us, but he was one heck of a Georgia Bulldog back.
shortest NFL career of the guys we're talking about tonight. As Brian said, the neck injury. Tim, I want to ask you. You were quoted as saying after he had passed that UGA fans, that's the University of Georgia, of course, fans, Facebook family, my heart is deeply saddened, and the human side of me is devastated. So what did this guy mean to you?
Lars Jamel Tate, he meant the world to me, man. And sometimes I still get emotional because I can't, it's hard to believe that he's gone. He was one of my best friends. He was one of those guys that I immediately took to when I reported to Georgia as a freshman in '85. Lars was that guy. He was a starting tailback. Him and a guy named Cleveland Gary talked to him a couple of days ago that ended up transferring to Miami. But Lars Tate, man, when I first met him on a visit, an unofficial visit to Georgia, I actually thought he was a linebacker. He was that big, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow. But just a good-looking guy, very impressive, very intelligent. He was a student of the game. He was big, he was fast, and he loved the game, and he was physical. And, he was one of my best friends, man. So when he passed away last August, I was devastated because, sometimes, as an athlete, you go through those times, and I think athletes understand what I'm saying, where you feel invincible. And Lars Tate was one of those guys, you just don't die that way. You know what I mean? And he was one of my best friends. We got a chance to communicate, talk about a lot of stuff, talk about Jesus a lot, but he loved the game of football. He loved the University of Georgia. And Lars was also a great baseball player. And I don't know if you guys know this, but his son, Donovan Tate, was a first-round pick for the San Diego Padres back in the day. So Lars Tate, man, he is truly missed. I love him. I love his family. And what a wonderful teammate. What a wonderful guy. He made me better, because we split time at Georgia. He made me a better running back.
So we're going to move into our vote, but before we do that, I just want to say that research has shown, and the facts show, that Kevin is much like a politician and making stuff up tonight. Paul was correct. So
What did I make up?
You made up a single game rushing of Todd Gurley. It's probably going to cost you.
At the time of when he did it, it was the record. Thank you very much.
Actually, that's not accurate. Gurley is the well, no, Chubb would have been after.
Yes,
right,
Chubb was after him. Chubb took over when my guy got injured. So Paul, again, trying to accuse me of lying.
Since 92.
Right. Okay, so but there was also one other one too, but I digress. You people can take that for what it's worth.
We could take all day and talk about
let's move into our vote. Cannot pick your own tonight, guys. Paul, I know who you're not voting for, but who are you voting for?
Well, I mean, a simple Google search is, when you talk about the best running backs, it's Herschel Walker. Then it says Nick Chubb for career stats. If you added his receiving, he's over 5,000 yards. Then it's Sony Michel. So who took Sony Michel?
No one. He was the honorable mention. So
then it goes Todd Gurley. He's way down on the list. I can't vote for him because Kevin did such a poor job on that argument. I guess I'll go Garrison Hurst. He'd be number 5 on the list.
Okay, you realize we're picking the best tonight, but all right. Kevin, go ahead.
As much as I hate to do this, my guy averaged more yards per carry, and Chubb wouldn't have gotten as many yards if my guy didn't go down.
He only played 3 years.
But I'm gonna go with Chubb, even though Paul annoys the crap out of me.
Brian.
Wow, this is something. I'm gonna have to go with Nick Chubb.
Yeah, you're smart.
Just the best overall. I think just the most polished back. I think. I mean, he could in the way he was able to, receiving and rushing. I just think he's just one heck of a back.
Leroy.
I was impressed with all 3 arguments. But I would have to go with Gurley. Gurley was the most impressive to me, and to have the record at the time of being in school was impressive to me, to have the all-time Georgia record before Chubb did. So
yeah, so I'm gonna go, and I think there's something that you guys might not have factored in today, and that is the teams that they played on. Gurley was on a team that was national championship caliber. So is Nick Chubb. Hurst, Georgia's teams, they were good. They weren't national championship contenders. And Tate, I mean, he was on some decent teams, but they weren't the powerhouse that Georgia would become. So I think Tate actually had the hardest route. He didn't have the O-lines that some of these other guys had. So I'm taking Tate. Tim, we come to you. Who's your number one?
My number one, man, I got to go with number 38, Tim Worley. Hey, listen, considering I only played 2 full years at Georgia, man. But listen, man, I played with Lars. I played with Rodney Hampton. And really, when you want to separate, I mean, you got to really look at the style of running. And it ain't always the numbers that you put up, because I played with these guys, man. And but times were different back in the 80s and 90s compared to what it is now. And but overall, outside of Herschel Walker, I mean, I love Gurley, I love Sony Michel, Rodney Hampton, Tate, all those cats, even Noshawn Marino. But I got to put Nick Chubb up there, man. I got to put Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb was a workhorse. He stayed 4 years. I mean, he came back with a horrifying injury, and he just got better and better and better. And he's even proven it more with the Cleveland Browns right now. So, but yeah, man, Nick Chubb would be my guy. Outside of Herschel, Nick Chubb would be my next number one guy.
And for those tonight who are saying, why no Herschel Walker? This was the last 40 years. Walker was done in 82. So that's a win for Paul tonight. So our question order will be Paul, Leroy, Kevin, Brian.
Yeah, it makes me emotional because all the hard work I put into this research to make it accurate. I really appreciate Tim acknowledging that. I feel like today has been a success because of this. So I just wanted to take a brief self-serving moment. Thank you, Tim. My question for you is, who's more competitive, you or D?
Me and who?
D. Wife.
D? My ex-wife?
Yeah. A lot of people don't know, but she was an Olympic gymnast. So I figured you guys were really competitive with each other.
We were. I think she might have been more competitive because she actually, man, she knew football just as more than I did. And she was definitely a great athlete, and she loved sports. But she was very competitive. She could do some things that just amazed me. But what impressed me about Dee's competitive nature was when it came to football. Dude, she knew. She just knew. And she, it was, when we were married, she couldn't just sit and watch a game with me. She had to go in the closet and listen to what was the announcer for the Crimson Tide? I forget his name. But anyway, and she was very competitive, man. So she might have me a little bit.
My question to you is, what is your favorite run of all time, either in the college or the pros?
I would have to say, now I'm going to ride with the fans right now as far as the Georgia Bulldog fans. Probably the 89-yard touchdown run that I did against Florida my freshman year when Florida was number one. That was some said it was 89, some said it was 90, but it was just one of those moments, man, where it was just supernatural. Florida's ranked number one, and I think we're still the only team to be the number one school that year. And I just caught the ball, man, on a pitch to the right and saw that hole, and I planted that foot and got downhill. And there's no way, not even on a motorcycle, where you're going to catch it. So I think that was one of my most memorable runs. But me personally,
yes, sir.
This one's probably not on video, but I had a run in 1988, my redshirt junior year against William and Mary. And it was a homecoming game, right? And it's funny. I caught a sweep to the left. It's about 62 yards away from the end zone.
Yes, sir.
Keith Henderson kicked out the corner. I planted my foot, went down here. Free safety stepped in the gap. It was me and him. I lowered my shoulder, and I lifted him up, carried him with me for about 5 yards, I dropped him off, stayed in stride, and scored a 62-yard touchdown. And here's the kicker, guys.
Nice.
That guy, I found out that guy went into the locker room at halftime, took off his uniform, put it in the locker, called a cab, got a cab to the airport in Atlanta, flew back to Virginia, and quit.
You made a rage quit.
Listen, check this out. Hey, guys, check it out. And it's true because I played with one of his teammates, Robert Green, a running back out of William & Mary for Chicago. And then this past August, I asked Mike Tomlin, head coach for the Steelers, because he played at William & Mary. I said, was it true about what happened to the DB that I hit? He said, yep, it's all true, Tim. So
That's wild.
that was funny, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But yeah.
So Tim, I want to take you back to '89 when you got drafted. How are you feeling on draft night? And was there a team that you were hoping you were going to go with? And how'd you feel about the Steelers taking you at number 7?
Well, I mean, I felt pretty good. There was a lot of, the teams, they watch you, they investigate you, they do all these things. They want to see what they're investing their money into, right? And so I was hearing this, hearing that. I was hearing, yeah, you're going to be a San Diego Charger. I was hearing you're going to be a Falcon. You're going to be a Packer. You're going to be this and that. But what people don't know is, a month before that, maybe a couple of months, back then, redshirt juniors, Barry Sanders and I were the only 2 redshirt juniors. And the rest of the guys were seniors. So we couldn't go to the combine. And so all 28 teams came and worked me out one day in Athens. And they clocked me. They only wanted to see me run the 40, do the vertical, and take my weight. And, I was 6'2.5", 230. I ran a 4.38 in the 40. I had a vertical of 38.5 inches, I'm sorry. And I bench pressed 225 28 times. And so they said that's enough. And here's the thing, guys. Barry Sanders hadn't declared himself eligible for the draft yet. And so I had a long talk with the Detroit Lions after my workout, right? And they told me what they were looking for. They said Barry Sanders is the perfect fit for them, but he hasn't declared himself eligible yet. And they said if he doesn't, and I'm still around with the 3rd pick, they were going to pick me. And I was saying to myself, please don't pick me, man. No disrespect to the Detroit Lions, but I was like, no. And so, and then all of a sudden, Barry declared himself the next week for the draft eligible. And so San Diego was interested, Packers was interested, Atlanta was interested, and then the Steelers jumped on board heavily. So I found out the night before I got drafted that the Steelers were going to take me in with the 7th pick.
Nice.
So it was out in Beverly Hills, California, in the Beverly Palm Hotel with Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop. So it was amazing. It was just an awesome day.
Nice.
Well, Tim, as a lifelong Steelers fan, the 1989 season is one of my all-time favorites. After just a miserable start, losing 51-0 to the Browns and then 41-10 to the Bengals, you guys were able to turn it around, make the playoffs, and then upset Warren Moon and the Oilers in the Astrodome. So how were you guys able to get things going in the right direction? And do you feel like there was a defining moment which kind of brought about change for that team?
Well, I think one of the defining moments, and I got to give credit where credit is due, I played with some tremendous guys on the field, great guys off the field. And I had an unbelievable coach. Chuck Noll, man, he's one of the better ones, and God, may he rest in peace. But, Chuck personally, he handpicked me. He drafted me. And one of the things Chuck told me when I had to sit down and talk with him, he said he didn't draft me because of my speed, my size, and all my running ability. He drafted me because of my blocking ability. I was a pretty good blocker. I could have played fullback. And if you guys remember the Steelers, we ran the trapping offense. And,
right.
You're in a 3-point stand and you're split back. And me, 6'2.5", 230, running a 4.3, line me 8 yards deep and pitch me the ball and get out of my way. Okay. And so I struggled a little bit coming into Pittsburgh, trying to slow myself down to all the trapping. And that was more for like Merle Hodge. He was a perfect fit for the trap, one of my better teammates. But Chuck Noll, he believed in us. He told us not to panic, no matter what the media, no matter what the people said. And all of a sudden, man, after that Cincinnati game, we began to turn things around, and we played the Minnesota Vikings that third week of the '89 season. And guys, I scored my first NFL touchdown on my birthday against the Minnesota Vikings, and it was history from there. And we just turned it around, man, and we started pounding people. I kind of got my groove going, and I kind of picked up on, because I was in training. I missed training camp. I was in training camp for 4 days, and so I had to catch up with everything. So that was an awesome year. You're right, brother.
Same order, guys. One more each.
Tim, I liked Kevin's question. So it sounded like you were happy to be drafted by the Steelers based on some of the competitors, but over the course of the years, the coaches there have changed, and I wondered, how do you feel about where the Steelers are sitting now, and in the NFL currently? What are some of the ways it's changed over the years that you don't necessarily like?
Well, when we go back to the '89 season, number one, guys, y'all need to understand the Steelers has always been my favorite team since I was 9 years old. So growing up here in North Carolina, it was either the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Redskins, or the original Baltimore Colts. Nobody liked the Falcons. They were the Dirty Birds before they were the Dirty Birds. But anyway, but God bless them. But they were always my favorite team. And Mean Joe Green was always my mother's favorite football player. So she got a chance to meet him in '89. But I think, the difference in the game compared to what it was back then, I played in Three River. I went to, I don't even know the name of the field right now. It's not Hines anymore, but I went there. Me and my son, we went there for the first time this year, to the Jets game and to actually training camp up in Latrobe. And one of the most impressive things about the Steelers and their organization and their leadership, owners and everything, you've had only 3 head coaches within 53 years? Yeah. That's unbelievable, man. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin, since 1969. And it doesn't get any better than that. And I believe that the Steelers is one of the best organizations, one of the best franchises in the NFL because, guys, they still treat me just like I'm an active player. I get invited to so much stuff. I get to be involved with so many things. And, it was great to be a Steeler. And you guys might not believe this, man, but Steelers, my 2 favorite teams ever since I was a kid. Number 1 was the Steelers. Number 2 was the Bears, and I played for both teams. So I tell kids, man, dreams come true. Dreams come true.
That's cool. That's cool.
Unless you're Kevin.
Leroy.
First off, I think that's awesome. You got to play for your 2 favorite teams growing up. That is cool. As a Seahawks fan, I grew up. I'd always dreamed of playing for. It would be one thing to play in the NFL, but to play for your favorite team, that is just awesome. My next question is, you talked about King Henry, Derrick Henry earlier. Who do you think are the top running backs in the game today, and who do you think is going to make a surprise and maybe pop into that, top 2 or 3 this next season, sir?
Well, Derrick Henry I like Derrick Henry because he's big and he's fast. And, I was one of those big 6'2", 230 guys running a 4.4, 4.3,
and a 38 inch vertical and a 38 inch. That's impressive.
Yeah,
That's impressive. Yes, sir.
Yeah, coming out of high school, I had a 41-inch vertical in high school. After I blew my knee out at Georgia, it kind of decreased a little bit. But I love the big, fast guys, like the Herschel Walkers, the Bo Jackson. Derrick Henry just remind me of that time. And even Najee Harris. Najee, I had a chance to meet him this past summer in training camp. Just an outstanding guy. Forget about his talent on the field. He's just an outstanding guy, man. And we had a conversation because he was hurt during training camp. And then there's a couple more guys that I've been paying attention to, man. I can't think of them right off the bat. But, they kind of give you that feel of how it used to be, even though the game has changed tremendously. And those are the type of guys. Yeah, old school, man. Those are the type of guys, man, that you listen, you got to bring a lunch with you coming to tackle those guys. I'm serious, man. If you've seen the legs on Najee Harris, dude, I'm telling you, man, it's crazy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, who was your opponent on the defensive line that you just absolutely did not want to run up against? Like, who was the big defenders when you played
Okay.
in the NFL that you were just like, man, I don't want to face off against him?
Okay, D-line or linebackers or just D-line?
Do one D-line and two linebackers. Do like
Okay.
two of each.
All right, D-line. I had to say Reggie White. And what's my man John? What's my man used to play for the Vikings? John.
Abraham?
No,
John Randall.
Randall. Oh my goodness, this dude was nonstop running his mouth. You know that, but he backed it up though. You know what I mean? Let me tell you guys a story. You know, I missed all the training camp. If you guys paid attention back the '89, I missed all the training camp. I was in training camp 4 days, and so we had a preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles, and Reggie White was playing, right? So I think it was the 4th or the 5th preseason game. Chuck Noll, you know, he said, you need to get in there and make mistakes. You know, we paying you this money. You got to get in there, right? I went in there, man, and I looked across the line, brother, and guess who was just staring at me, man? It was Reggie White. And I was like, the dude stood 6'6.5", right? And I walked up to him. I said, how you doing, Mr. White? He said, you know how Reggie talked. He said, how you doing, Worley? He said, I heard you just got to camp. I said, yes, sir, Mr. White. He said, welcome to the NFL. I said, yes, sir, Mr. White, take it easy on me. So it was kind of funny, man. But Reggie White was one of those guys on the D-line. Now, when it comes to linebackers, there's so many of them. You had the Lawrence Taylors, you had the Mike Singletaries, you had a very underrated linebacker played for the Eagles was Byron Evans. That dude was a beast. Every time he hit you, it hurt. You know what I mean? And then I think one of the most fierce, dominant, most powerful, hardest hitting linebackers that I faced off, I never played against him. He was on my team, and we went at it in practice, and that was Greg Lloyd. Greg Lloyd was unbelievable, man. You know, the dude was mean, and he's one of my good friends today.
Well,
now when it comes to DBs, you always had to look for Ronnie Lott. You always had to pay attention to where Atwater was. You had to pay attention to where Dennis Smith was. You know, guys like that, man. And Gene Atkins, you had to pay attention to where those guys were because they would take your head off, man.
But Tim, the University of Georgia has a rich history tradition. They've also, obviously had a lot of recent success. What was it like for you back in the 80s to run onto that field in Athens and battle the SEC opponents for a few hours there between the hedges on Saturdays? And what is that Bulldog fan base like?
Well, I believe the Georgia fan base is the best in the world, especially when we travel. They are the best, man. And if you guys ever played a game before, I mean, I don't know if you guys ever been in front of a crowd like that, but when you're playing in front of 100,000 people, 90,000 plus fans, and you hear that sound, you hear them rooting your name, you hear that roar, you can't replace that. You can't replace that. There's no high like that. And so that's why it was so hard for me when it was all said and done for me to make that transition to a normal lifestyle. Because what are you doing? I remember a guy named Tim. I forget this guy's name. He played for the Falcons, went to Syracuse. Tim, I forget his name. He played outside linebacker, defensive end. He had a book called What Do You Do When the Cheering Stops? And when the cheering stopped for me, man, I was completely lost. It took me a decade and a half just to make that transition into a normal lifestyle. Because for me, I was sheltered since age 10. I competed all around the country at 10 years old, and all of a sudden, 30 years old, it all comes to a halt. Not by just me wanting to give it up, but by default. You know what I mean? I made some bad choices as an athlete, during my career that I regretted for a long time, but I was able to forgive myself and move on with it.
So we'll get you out of here with this tonight. Brian had mentioned the 89 season, and you guys go into that, making the wild card. You knock off the Houston Oilers with a Gary Anderson field goal there pretty late. then you go into Mile High Stadium against the Denver Broncos. You guys have a lead with 7 minutes left in the game. What is your thought? What's the team's thoughts? I mean, Elway was already kind of notorious at this point for his game-winning drives. Were you expecting them to make it 71 yards? And then, maybe just go over for me, like, what happened in that last drive when you guys did get the ball back with 2:27 left and sadly ended with the fumble on the bad snap there.
Right. Well, I believe that we had the game. If you watched that entire game, we kicked Denver's butt up and down the field. The entire game until about maybe 4 or 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And I remember when after Denver scored, we were down by 1 point. And I was just thinking Gary Anderson, because Gary was so consistent. He don't miss, right? And so I can remember there was 1 minute and 3 seconds on the clock, and I think Bubby fumbled the snap. He was in the shotgun, and he fumbled the snap, and I think Merle tried to pick it up, and he kicked it, and then one of the Denver players fell on it. But, we were moving into a position where Gary could have kicked a 45-plus yard field goal, and we would have won that game and went on to play, I want to say Cleveland.
It was, Cleveland.
For the AFC Championship, and probably would have went and played the 49ers in the Super Bowl. But you know what? It just wasn't meant to be that year. But it gave us something to bank off of coming into the 90 season. Because, like you said, man, we started out horrible in 1989, the first two or three games, and then we completely turned it around, man, and went to the playoff. Nobody believed it. And to be honest, we kicked Denver's butt until the 3 minutes left in the game. We kicked their butt the whole game.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the way football goes sometimes, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you, Tim, for joining us. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, sir. Anytime, man.
Awesome.
Anytime, Brian.
All right.
Awesome. I'll remind everybody, hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you for watching. We'll see y'all next time. Have a great night.